Perfect. Thank you very much. Hi guys, thank you very much for having me here. Really appreciate it. You know, I'm looking at your coffee. I had coffee this morning, I love coffee, but I can't really handle caffeine very much. And what's interesting is that I think the barista who was dealing with me did not listen to me and he didn't give me decaf. So you guys might get a pretty, you know, psyched up version of me. I feel like okay, something is going on and that's gotta be caffeine. So please forgive me if I'm a little bit hyper. Okay?
By the way, the trees are very excited and they are beaming a ton of energy at you.
So maybe that's what it is. It's not the caffeine. So I see you guys are pretty cash, which is great. Usually I have a bunch of folks around me with suits and everything, so I put on shoes just because of that, and put on a suit, and I was able to wear it till now. So again, thank you very much for having me. My name is Csaba Lucas. I originally started working with athletes and sports. That's, you know, back a quarter century ago. It sounds crazy. So I started to work with athletes because I had a very athletic background and I was pretty successful helping others to bring the best out of themselves when it comes to physical performance. So naturally I was like, okay, let's be a coach, right? That's easy. It kind of made sense for me to go that direction. And I worked with a lot of big teams and eventually I opened a facility on Wall Street, right next door to Wall Street in New York. And you know, because of that, somehow business folks got involved with my company. I went into the business world. And then I realized there's a lot of impact to be done, you know, because those people are the ones who a lot of times control a lot of things that we are, you know, forced to live in. So it was very interesting for me to go into the world of business because I had no interest in it, but I love people. And then I realized that they were in a big need to understand maybe how to be more vital, how to be a little bit more healthy and, you know, happy. And then over time, you know, I had the good chance to work with a lot of big organizations and companies and a lot of big teams, sports teams, and with a lot of powerful people. And I tell you, I'm very excited to be here. And Andy already foreshadowed why. In 1970, there was a very interesting thing that happened. Collectively, we decided around the world that we're gonna remove lead out of gasoline and all different stuff. We removed lead. That basically led to 80% of the blood lead levels dropped as average in human beings, right? So that's a pretty amazing thing because it doesn't matter how many organic vegetables you would eat in the 70s, how many exercises you would do, there's no way for you to affect yourself such ways. So collectively, the decisions we make, that's what's going to impact our individual health, oftentimes more than what individually we can do ourselves. So when I talk to people like you guys, whose work essentially could affect everyone's health and well-being, now that's inspiring to me, because that's what we all need, you know. And so I can tell my kids to eat all the right stuff and do the right things, but you guys are the ones who are going to help the environment that we all exist in to make better. So thank you for that, and that's why I'm excited to be here. Now, what does that really mean? So why am I so excited to talk to you guys? Because every single one of us here, unless you had some severe brain injury, we have something in us, our brain, that is pretty unbelievable. Now, there is a galaxy 13.8 billion light years away that we had the chance and have the chance to view and see. I mean, that's a pretty crazy idea. 13.8 billion years it takes for the light to come from there to here, and we human beings, we figured out a way somehow to view that very thing. That's amazing. The human brain has the storage capability of a quadrillion. Quadrillion is 10 to the 15th, which is a pretty crazy number. Just to give you an idea, if you would want to store the entire internet and everything that's on the internet today, that's approximately the storage space you would need. And every single one of us have a brain like that. And your brain speed, the capability your brain has, is about 30 times faster than the most powerful supercomputer, which is called Sequoia. It's still 30 times slower than any single one brain that's sitting here right today. It can process about 1,016 processes a second. That's insane. It's amazing. Okay? The reason I'm saying this, Because people always think, unfortunately, in our society, we are exposed to ideas that most people, by the time they grow up, they believe that maybe they are not the ones who can make a difference. They are maybe not the ones who have all that genius in them. I don't believe that. Every single person, unless you had a major brain injury, you have the capability to figure out everything and anything. And our brains have been like this for a long time. This is not a new thing. Our brain is actually gradually shrinking during the past 20,000 years. So it shrank about a tennis ball size during the last 20,000 years, right? And when I tell these things to my kids, I have 3 kids, one of my sons was like, well, Dad, yeah, of course. What do you mean the shrink? I mean, cavemen couldn't do what we could do. Cavemen can't build an iPhone. And I was like, well, yeah, but can you build an iPhone? And he said, no. Can I build an iPhone? No. Can Steve Jobs, he was still alive. Yeah, can he build an iPhone? No. No, because basically what happens is, right, someone makes the plastic, someone works on an app, another person works on another app. So not like every single one of us could build an iPhone ourselves, right? It's a big collective thing that we do. So what basically means, if you would have grabbed an individual 20,000 years ago from a cave and you could have brought her here and you told her that, hey, listen, so this is how things work, do the best you can do with it. Yeah, most possibly they could have done a better job. And why is that? Because we human beings, luckily I'm talking to a group that I think might believe in evolution. Sometimes these days that's even a question. But so since you guys mostly buy into that, the wild idea, so let's assume that we evolved to be the way we are for a very particular reason, right? And now what is that reason? Why are we the way we are? Because this amazing brain that we have did not evolve because we developed tools. We already had this brain even before we developed the first tool. And I'm talking the first knife, the first hammer, all of those things. Then suddenly most people are like, oh, I never thought about it this way. So we had this, what the heck? Why do we have this brain? Like, why did it evolve to be the way it is? Now, I think it's superbly important to understand why it evolved into what it is. Because you need to understand the tool that you're working with. And the tool is you. The only way how you can live properly if you understand what the heck you're working with. So until you don't have some sort of idea that you can put yourself behind, what you can believe in, right, you don't have a chance to really utilize yourself most effectively. So I go back to that same idea that, all right, so we had this brain before we developed the very first tool. So we needed this brain. Nature doesn't create waste. Nature wasn't like accidentally just made it too big of a brain. Yeah, sure, spend like, 100,000 years working on all of these different things, eventually develop a computer, and at that point you will need that brain. It doesn't work like that. We needed the brain back then to be able to survive. Now, more tools you use, less you need to use yourself. That is the reason, as soon as we started to develop the first tools, there was a certain part of the brain that you didn't need to utilize anymore. Okay, translating that to a modern term. For example, many of us using GPS these days, right? Now there is a so-called synaptic pruning that takes place in the human brain. Synaptic pruning is basically when there is an essential aspect of the human brain, a capability that the human brain provides you, and you don't use it, those synapses start to prune up. All right? So when you use a GPS, you pruning up the section of the brain that evolved to help you with spatial understanding, where you are in space. And I know that you guys had a lot of connection to Australian sort of environments, and Australian Aboriginals, in their language, you can understand the importance of, for example, spatial awareness, right? Whenever an Aboriginal greets another one in their own language, they don't say hello. They say, the welcoming is like, I'm coming from northwest and I'm heading to, southeast. That's how they greet each other. They let you know where they're coming from and where they're headed. That is their greeting. If they tell you that, hey, my right leg hurts, they don't tell you my right leg. They say, my leg which points to northwest is hurting. Okay, so spatial awareness was super important for you to survive in nature. Now today it's not so important because we have the GPS. So what happens with your brain? Shrivels up, right? So more tools you use, more your brain shrivels up. So it makes sense that we have about, this tennis ball size, smaller brain today than we had 20,000 years ago. Because when you had diddly squat to use for tools, all you had yourself. So at my company, what we do a lot of research. We try to understand anything to do with human existence when it comes to physicality, psychology, spirituality, all of those things. So we do a lot of research. And we try to develop a system that made sense for us so we can really put ourselves behind. So the only thing that I've never seen beaten up theory, why the heck we are here, is because we developed for a very particular way of hunting. And that hunting is called persistence hunting. Persistence hunting is essentially where you see a footprint, and then you track down an animal, and eventually able to run the animal down with your own sheer physical endurance, okay? And essentially, you don't kill the animal by throwing things at it, you do not do anything like that, you just keep running after the animal till the animal collapses in a heart attack, okay? We evolved to a very hot temperature. We evolved as a species somewhere around the Kalahari, and we evolved for a very specific type of temperature to do this very thing that I just described to you, which is basically over 105 degrees, even cheetahs stop hunting. Okay? There's no other species predators that hunt, except we have this unbelievable system of glands cooling ourselves, so we are able to even operate that way. So over 105 degrees, you can run an animal down, as long as you make sure you keep following their tracks, so you need to be a superb tracker, and you have the physical capability of keep running in that high heat, you're able to have a pretty good meal, okay? Persistence hunting, something that's very seldom practiced today. There are traces of it in many different traditional cultures. I had the good fortune to spend an entire month with a tribe in Africa who still utilize that in certain part of their year, and I had first-hand experience seeing how that works. And it's pretty fascinating, but it yields to a pretty high success rate. It's 80% of the time when a human being pursued a hunt like this, they succeeded, which in relative terms, that's a pretty amazing percentage comparison to like a cheetah, for example, who's a very successful hunter, only succeeds about 50% of the time. A leopard only about 35% of the time. A lion about 25% of the time. You know, when they pursue something, they can succeed. So we became the top predators and the most successful predators before we developed the first tool, because our brain and our whole body that belongs to it was able to create this amazing result and existence. Now, most people believe today that, but hunter-gatherers, it was a really tough life. It was really rough. Not quite. When it comes to analyzing how much time people spend with work in traditional, and I'm talking about traditional hunter-gatherer societies, we still exist, some of them around, they don't work that much. They work about 15 hours approximately throughout the week, and they spend about 15 hours taking care of their camps and wherever they live. So that's adds up to about 30 hours activity, you know, and the rest of it, they're spending with the loved ones and the people who they care about, and they're doing the things that blow their hair back. Sit around campfires in the evening, they talk about ideas, they have rituals, ceremonies, and all kinds of stuff. So it's really not as tough of a life as we think it is, as long as you are in an environment that you evolved for, okay? So as a species at one point, 200,000 years ago, we were able to leave the area where we originally kind of evolved to exist. And as soon as you leave the area where you evolved to exist, there are some things, even Native Americans, the way how they lived in the land over here, their footprint affected the environment in ways that killed off a lot of large carnivores, a lot of large herbivores. So even Native Americans, throughout their existence here in North America, made a footprint on the environment that created holes in there. All right. So, but where we originated, around the Kalahari, we were able to exist with nature in a way that we did not harm nature, and we were able to live in a completely symbiotic relationship. So I believe that our goal in our modern world, and evolution goes in the direction, if we don't figure out how to exist in a symbiotic relationship with the planet, right, now, then sooner or later, things will be sorted out. So I believe one of the most important steps is to keep understanding where we're coming from and how we operate, and apply ourselves individually, right? And if we all do that, then suddenly everything perhaps going to start to change around again. We can figure out this whole big question. Now, so I go back to the brain. So let's buy into this idea that persistence hunting is something that we possibly evolved to do. Now, persistence hunting, there's one thing to run, for a long period of time. I know it sounds crazy because running down a kudu, for example, it can take anywhere from about the shortest amount of time they recorded that this kind of persistence hunting takes. It's about 2.5 hours, and the longest one was about 15 hours, right? That means you would need to be able to track and run after an animal for up to 15 hours from about 2.5 hours. So that means you need to be able to pull out a double marathon any given time if needed out of your system. Now that sounds a lot for most people today, but if you consistently put, you start to act the way how you meant to act as a human being, it's really not that crazy. You can run a marathon every single week without any kind of major effect, as long as little by little you apply yourself properly. So it's really not that difficult for a human being. If you question that idea, just look at the movie called Running the Sahara. These guys, there's two guys who ran across the Sahara Desert, and they ran, I think, 140 marathons in 115 days. So it is possible. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's really not that difficult on your system, because this is what we evolved to exist with, right? So the physical aspect is really not that difficult. I know a lot of people who can do this. I do this regularly all the time. So it's not that difficult. What is the real difficult part is where our brain really kicks in, which is the tracking. Tracking is not just there is a footprint and there's another one and keep following it. That's not like that at all. Because when you follow an animal for a pretty long period of time, there's much more to it. Because obvious footprints are not always there for you to pick up. There's a lot of times when you don't see anything. And then when you need to, so every time you look at a footprint, you don't look at it to follow. You look at it to get to know that very animal. That very being that somewhere out there, that idea of the animal, you want to get to know that, is this animal hungry? Is it a young one? Is it happy? Is it looking for water, carrying the head low, looking for water? Or you're looking at every aspect of that footprint, because you know that sooner or later you will lose the footprint. And at that point, you need to bring your artistic self, and you need to start to behave and act like the animal. And you will know with your body, you basically give yourself over to that idea that you are that animal. And then you're going to start to move and behave that like the animal. So you know when there's no footprint, you know where that animal is going, because you became that animal. You start to develop these stronger and stronger cords between you and that very animal. Okay? So the human brain has to have, a very logical aspect of it, because you make logical decisions. Okay, so here is one footprint. I'm following a kudu. That means approximately, about a meter or so the next step, what I'm looking for. So there's a logical aspect to it. There's a major artistic aspect to it. There's major speculation that needs to take place. So if you really start to analyze in a deep level, tracking, even when you look at the poop, that animal pooped, right? You look at it, the way how the poop lands, it will give you an idea how fast that animal was traveling, okay? Was there, and you also need to make sure, it's not about just now, but it's also about, okay, this footprint is about 2 hours old. The reason I know it's 2 hours old, because I paid attention since the morning how the weather was, where the wind was blowing, and I knew that the wind was really picked up a few hours ago, and the edges of this particular footprint is blown off. That means it must have happened about 2 hours ago, because before that there was really quiet, there was no wind. So you need to be aware of your environment from morning till evening, all the time, because when it comes to catching that food that will help you to survive, you will need to apply everything that you know, and every aspect of your artistic capabilities, everything. So the human brain evolved for this tracking. So every single human being's brain is a tracker brain. What do I mean by that? Exactly what I just described. But just take an easier example. If you guys ever seen a hunting dog, right? Doesn't matter if you live in New York, you take a hunting dog out, what do? Even though they've never been in nature, maybe just only in New York, they are looking for tracks, looking for the scent to pick up. Because the dogs are also tracking animals. They're also the ones, also persistence hunters. They follow a scent. They're particularly good at following scent, and they ran down animals, and they also ran down animals and exhausted them, and eventually the animals stopped, and they were able to take care of the animal. So the dogs operate the same way as a human being, except we have a different kind of process, different kind of system than a dog. our nose is, especially today, is not so good, you know. So this is why you need to realize if I'm a tracker, right? If every single one of you a tracker, you like it or not, even if you are, you know, someone who just loves reading books, you're a tracker. Every time you look at the book, you're tracking an idea through the book. You're looking at signs, right? You don't look at A, D, Z, B, whatever. You look at something, you see CONNECT, and it's not like you see the letters, you see the concept, which is connect, right? You have the concept pop into your mind. It's not, you don't look at the individual footsteps. Whenever a tracker looks at the footprint, they don't look at the footprint. They see the story, right? So when you read a book, you're doing a very primitive, very simple tracking. You're just tracking those signs, and the concept and the story unfolds in your head. So it doesn't matter who you are, you're tracking, okay? You're tracking ideas. So sometimes people ask me, okay, I understand this tracking idea. Yeah, there's an animal, you need to hunt, you run after, you follow the tracks, and you catch the animal because you need it to eat, right? Well, the animal, right up until you get close to it, is just an idea, right? Because you see it based on the signs, right? The tracks, that there's an animal, but it's really an idea, nothing else. And today, one day, one of these trackers woke up, and he decided, I'm going to track down the moon. Okay, I'm going to track that sucker down. I want to get to that moon. And eventually we got there and we stepped on the moon. So ideas is what we track. We are idea tracker species, and we are so good at it. Because unfortunately, it doesn't matter what crazy ideas you want to track down, you can track it down. And we don't come in a manual, unfortunately, because the manual is essentially tribal rituals and traditions, which none of us have anymore, unfortunately, because you know, if I look around, all of you guys from very different backgrounds, obviously, and we all originally had these structures that educated us how to exist together with the environment in a way that it will help you and help the environment and live in this really nice symbiotic relationship. But none of those ideas are around anymore, unfortunately. Traces of it here and there you can see, but there's no comprehensive structure. So we have these tracker brains that can track ideas, but we're not even aware of that we have that, and we just randomly track things. Sometimes if you look at you find someone who's successful, they succeeded to tracking down an idea that they kind of wanted. Let's say, I'm just going to bring a very simple example, a Wall Street individual, right? They wanted to have a lot of money. That was an idea at one point, and then they busted their balls and went for it, and they succeeded, and they tracked down the big load of money, right? So, but you know, they didn't use any of these ideas. So in the process of tracking down that animal, the money, what happened? Oftentimes they sacrificed their family because they didn't realize how to do it in a way, in a balanced way that will, you know, support you as a being on every level. So you also heard probably other things in the process. It's maybe the things that you invested into coal companies, you know, gas companies and stuff like that, destroy the environment. So this tracking brain, unfortunately, can cause a lot of damage. And you guys know it more than the average Joe out there, that what happens if we make irresponsible trackings. We can create major harm, right? So understanding what you're dealing with, so you can track down things that you truly want, and you don't accidentally track things down you don't really want. Because oftentimes, these, you know, let's say these Wall Street individuals, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about Wall Street and you know, businessmen. That's just generalization. It's just an example, right? But oftentimes what basically happens, if I give you a metaphor, it's like if you just follow a random footprint and you just follow, and run after it, and you get there and it's a hyena. Oh shit, I didn't want to track down a hyena, right? I don't want to be here. And this is the same thing that happens. If you expose people to the understanding that you're tracking things, and then they realize, okay, I've been tracking something I didn't want. Yeah, I wanted a lot of money. I didn't want money and destroy all these things. I didn't want to destroy my family. I didn't want to destroy my physical health. I didn't want to destroy any of those things, right? If they would have been aware what an amazing device they have and they will track down things, then they would have been using themselves differently. So this is why I believe one of the most important first steps for everyone to realize that you have this tracking device, and then learn how to use that device for what you want, and make sure you don't accidentally track things that you don't want. All right? So I'll bring you a very plain example. How does it work when someone who let's say there was a gentleman who came to me who was about 350 pounds, right? And he wanted to lose weight for obvious reasons. He was about 5'6", so you can imagine. He was quite a sight, a gentleman. And he wanted to lose weight, and he tried a lot of different things. And what he did was stepping on a scale every day. Stepped on it, he saw 350 pounds. He's like, oh, I need to just really be careful, eating less, and he couldn't succeed. He just couldn't do it. Why is that? Because he did not understand, again, how the tracking brain works. The tracking brain works in a very simplistic way, and I'm going to try to break it down for you guys. There are two different components of this tracking brain. One, I call this the conscious mind, and another is the subconscious mind. Each of those parts of your brain have a very particular job. The conscious mind we overrate usually. We think too much about its capability, but it's really a tiny % of our brain capability that we can apply consciously. The real beast is the subconscious mind. So when, just think about the conscious mind as like the telescope, as a tracker, okay? As a tracker, you're looking at what you want to hunt down, and this is the lens of your telescope, right? Whatever you put in there, that's what you're going to track. So if you point this telescope and you point it down to something that viscerally affects you, like you look at the 350 pounds written there, right? You're focusing your telescope on that, your subconscious mind will lead you to that. So your subconscious mind will develop a way for you to get to whatever is in your telescope. If you're pointing it every morning on that scale that shows 350 pounds, your subconscious mind is going to do everything to make sure you track down the 350 pounds. That's why stepping on a scale regularly never works when it comes to lose weight. Because you're constantly focusing on the things that you actually don't want, you know? That's why, you know, there's the famous saying, don't think of a pink elephant, right? And as soon as someone tells you, don't think about an elephant, what happens? Immediately the elephant idea is just emerged in your brain. Your brain can't think that way because whatever you put in your telescope, in your conscious mind, that's gonna be in the lens of your telescope. That's the thing you're gonna follow. Even if it's written, don't follow the elephant is gonna be there. Now, so essentially what's in your telescope, in your conscious mind are thoughts. We have about 65,000 thoughts a day as an average individual. 65,000 thoughts, that's a lot of thoughts, right? Unfortunately, about 85% of them, according to some studies, but at least 70% of those 65,000 thoughts has a negative connotation to it. A negative connotation to it. That means about 70 to 85% of the ideas that you're tracking are things that are not really serving your vitality and your well-being. All right? So suddenly, the idea of, okay, I got to do something about it. I don't want to track down and waste all my energies on things that I really don't want to track down, right? So how do you do that? So I figured that maybe a good analogy for this group will work well. Think about your brain as a garden, okay? What do you need to do for a garden to operate well? You want to make sure you plant seeds in there that you want to see grow, right? So the seed is essentially the thing that you really would like to track down. For example, for you guys, you know, having clean air in Los Angeles is something that you all probably want to track down. So that's a seed that you put into the garden. But what's very important that doesn't happen with that seed? You want to make sure that seed has enough moisture, has enough sunlight, right? So the weeds around in your garden not overshadowing the area, doesn't suck moisture away, and you know, all of those things. So, and what are the weeds? The weeds are the negative thoughts. I call those the automatic negative thoughts that occur in your brain because of your life and because of insecurities, because of all the advertisement and all the things that we are bombarded with, you know, essentially weakens your system, right? And insecurities and all of those things, that 70 to 85% of the 65,000 thoughts, all of those negative thoughts are the weeds, because those waste your energy, right? So what you want to make sure, you pull the weeds out, right? You want to try to start cultivate your garden, cultivate your brain by getting rid of some of those weeds, right? So your little seed that you really want to see grow can actually grow. Huh? That was interesting. That's my wake up. I'm like, oh my God, am I dreaming here? That's my wake up. So, all right, so imagine that your garden, you put the seed in there that can grow and you're pulling the weeds out. So what it requires for you to really learn about cultivating your brain. So when I work with groups, with individuals, that's what I'm trying to teach them, how to cultivate their brain by teaching them how to focus on what they want to focus and be clearly aware of what they're focusing on, that they're going to track down, and what are the things that they want to weed out of their lives, what are the thoughts they want to get rid of because it's not constructive and not aiding their vitality. So this is the basic structure. So the reason I wanted to share this with you guys, because without this idea, anything that you try doing, eating organic, going for a run, doesn't really have much meaning behind it. You know, it's just the thing that you do. That's why it's so difficult to keep up exercise programs, right? Because you don't understand how it really relates to you as a human being. You know, you go into a gym and you try to exercise and you start to do some shoulder raises, right? Just think about this. This is something that you do. And think about what your psychology and your spiritual being thinks. All right, I'm standing in a cave and I'm moving my ass, right? That's what logical sense does that make for you as a species? None, because in a cave environment where you don't see far in distance, you're meant to chill and relax, right? So that's why, you know, if you look at how gyms work, it's a great idea, but it doesn't really work on the long run. You know, I had the chance to work with a lot of crazy folks who are just nuts about exercising and stuff, but even they can't handle longer than 20 years or so going to a gym. And what happens to the rest of your life, you know, the next 70 years of your life? It's something that, thank you.
Sorry, we have a meeting.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
You know, so the reason it's important to understand all of these aspects, what you're dealing with, otherwise you're going to start wasting your energy on things that's not really constructive on the long run. So I try to get people away from gyms. And most of the time when I tell this to people, they're like, what? You know, you're supposed to help me to, you know, to be healthier even physically. I'm like, yeah, but it's not sustainable. I'm into making sure that by the time you're 100, you're still doing the processes and the rituals and the traditions that make you more and more and more vital human being. What happens if you don't apply these ideas? Very simple thing happens. You age. Aging is something we think as human beings is a normal state, right? But aging doesn't really exist in nature. What if an antelope would age? If an antelope ages, it becomes dinner, right, for the cheetah. So aging doesn't really happen. You can't afford to age. And human beings, we're not meant to age either. There have been some studies out there that basically looks at how aging process works for human beings. They tested that basically about age 25, when we human beings achieve our physiological prime, that's when we are able to do the most amazing physical stuff. So they wanted to see how our running capability changes if you grow up in a very traditional way, meaning close to earth, that you do those activities that we're meant to do as a, you know, hunter-gatherer being, and what kind of capabilities you're going to have at the age of 25. So there was a certain capability. Then they wanted to see, all right, okay, so we know what the peak is. Let's look at age 19, which is about 6 years before 25, right? What was the capability of age 19 average for an individual? And they saw that there was an increase in capability from 19 to 25. And they wanted to see, all right, so how long is it going to take for my capabilities after 25 to drop back down to the 19-year-old capability? And that's when the surprise came. It takes about age 62, 63, all right? So we're meant to exist with an unbelievable capability for a long period of time if you live your life the way how we kind of meant to live it, with that kind of proper resting, proper way of putting nutrition inside of you, proper way of moving, having a big variety of different things that you do physically, and then having a very happy and nurturing environment with a lot of rituals that helps you as your soul helps you psychologically and physically, right? So aging is optional, guys. It's up to you how much you age, you know? And if you buy into this idea and you start to cultivate your life, what you realize that people start to get better and better and better, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. That's why when someone comes to me, and I'm gonna stick with my Wall Street idea, someone from Wall Street comes to me, usually they come to me when they are pretty rich already, and their career, they get a pretty satisfaction from career, and they're like, okay, now I have to somehow get my shit together because all I do is scheduling one doctor appointment to the next, right? So they come to me, they're like, okay, so I want to get into some sort of shape so I can enjoy the fruit of my labor, right? So they come with that idea. And then if they hang in there for a pretty long period of time, and my company is very lucky because we have a lot of people who've been working with us for over 15 years, So if you hang in there for a few years, what they realize that, no, that's not the goal. The goal is for you to be the healthiest that you've ever been in your life. And that is exactly what can happen. Even if you start as late as 60 to start to do these things, by the time you're 65, you can be more capable than you've ever been in your life. Because the average scale that we have in our mind, what capabilities are the norm, are so pathetically low, because an average person today in a modern world, their capabilities are so nothing comparison to what we all meant to be able to do, that when you just start to improve a little bit, suddenly, comparison to an average Joe, you are like, wow, what's happening, So that's really inspiring because it's amazing what you can accomplish on every level, on the physical, psychologically, and spiritually as well. And then once you start to, the real change always happens in my humble experience on the spiritual level. When spiritually you start to implement ideas into your life and you try to act like that, it starts to affect you psychologically as well. You start to have a different value system, the way how you deal with other human beings, with the environment. It starts to, change. And then physically that shows up as well. This idea itself, I think it's easier to understand when I look at the same thing from a negative standpoint. I believe that illness and sickness for human beings, just like with any other creature, it's not a physical thing. It always starts on some other level. So I'll bring you a very simple example. So for example, if you take a look at a young girl, I have a little daughter, so I think about these things as well. So if you look at the little girl who grows up in a modern environment, so without any kind of major ritual that helping them to understand what is that to be a female in our world, right? And they get to the age of 13, 12 when they turn into a woman biologically. What happens? Their boobs get bigger, right? And for most girls, they don't really know what that really means, so they become kind of insecure about it. And because psychologically they're insecure, they don't have the spiritual guidance these days, how to deal with that, and they don't have the psychological understanding, they become insecure, so they hide their breasts by physically, covering themselves forward. So it shows up physically your psychological shortcoming, which is really led from a lack of the spiritual understanding of what it is to be a human, a female human in our world. So physically it shows up. When it comes to illness, cancer, or heart attacks, anything like that, it is really just the last stage. When things show up physically, that's just the last stage. That always led by something that a psychological shortcoming, which is led by non-understanding in a spiritual level and non-practice spiritual level. So why is that important to understand? Because if you want to understand how your current state is as a human being, you got to look at yourself physically, and you can look at yourself and say, all right, so this is what I'm dealing with right now. So there's no point judging wherever you are right now. There's no point to that whatsoever, because none of us consciously chose to have shortcomings. We're all trying to be the best we can possibly be, right? So you look at, this is what I have right now. So instead of focusing what physically I don't want, I take okay, so this is what I am, and there's infinite possibilities because we are idea trackers. So as long as you can think of an idea, you can track it down. Doesn't matter what it is. And this is the concept most people have a hard time wrapping their mind around. They're like, oh no, I can't run a double marathon. I can't be like really lean. All my life I was a little bit overweight and stuff like that. I can't really figure that out. It is just a limitation. No, you can. This guy who I talked to you guys earlier, who was 350 pounds, he went all the way down to 150 pounds. He was able to run several marathons without any kind of major effort. He became an expert Tai Chi master who's teaching Tai Chi in New York, And beside that he was already a very successful businessman, he became ultra successful as a businessman. So, no, it is possible. All you gotta do, buckle down and go for it. Because the difference between a tracker who succeeds and a tracker who doesn't succeed is only one thing. The one who doesn't succeed just stop tracking before they caught whatever they want. So all it is persistence. We are wired to be persistence hunter. That means it's in you to hunt down whatever idea you want, you know? Since your brain and Einstein's brain has literally almost no difference. Einstein had actually a smaller brain than average, you know, which is kind of interesting. They preserved his brain, so they were able to study it. So his brain was smaller than the average. There are certain sections that were more dense than the average, you know. But what I'm trying to say, if you got a brain and you didn't have a major brain injury, you can literally pick any idea and you can track it down. So you gotta be, okay, this is what I have, this is what I want. So as a tracker, what you want, just like a dog, when cops, for example, wanna have like a burglar caught, right? They give the police dog something to sniff that belongs to the burglar, and then the dog looks for the track, finds the trail, and starts tracking it, eventually hopefully getting to the burglar, right? But the same, this is how we work as well. Now human beings today, your brain has many different sensory input that goes into your being, right? But 80% of the information that we receive today as a modern human being comes through our visual cortex. So we are very visual creatures. Okay, 80% of the information enters our being through our eyes. So we basically need a visual sniff of what we want. Okay, you need to be able to visually have a viscerally stimulating image that is the representation what you want. All right? So I'm not someone who tells you to go back into a cave and live like how we used to live 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. I'm someone who's also embracing modern technology because I think it's amazing. What we create as human being is inspiring, right? So I'm telling you that utilize Pinterest, for example, right? Pinterest is great because it's all about visuals. So you create a Pinterest board for yourself and say, all right, I'm gonna stick to a very simple thing. I wanna get into really good shape, right? So I wanna put on that Pinterest board things that viscerally blows my hair back, okay? Without judgment, not feeling bad about being, how do you call it, shallow. Most people are like, this is so shallow. It's, you know, putting there like 8-packs and stuff. That's so shallow. I'm like, you don't need to share it with anyone. This is just for you, you know? Because there's nothing wrong with, you know, a capable human being is always healthy. This is what I tell people, that you want to focus on what you want to see. So if you focus on what you want to see, the capabilities you want to see, if you want to see being able to jump over this chair, for example, you put an image there when someone does that, and when you look at it, you're like, oh, that's so cool, right? So there's nothing wrong with having a body that is able to do those things. And the person who can jump over this, trust me, they're gonna have probably 6-packs, or, you know, doesn't matter what. But, you know, so the visual representation of health is a very good thing to focus on. Because if you have it, most likely you have pretty good capabilities that come with it. So whatever viscerally affects you, viscerally affects you and makes you excited, that's what you need to put out there. If it comes to your work, for example, pay attention how you wrap your mind around things. Do you want to fight pollution? What's in your telescope and the lens? Pollution, right? What you're going to do is you're not going to do the best job you can. But if you want to have clean air, right, and that's what you're shooting for, it somehow works just better. When you're focusing on things you want to see, right? So if you put on your Pinterest board, for example, when it comes to your career, your goals as 3 people, right? Utilize things that viscerally represents to you. Clean air, for example. The Amazon air, for example, is fantastic, right? If you guys all have the chance to go to forests where the air was like impeccable, you know? So those kind of visceral things are what you want to try to put on this. That way your brain will know what you're trying to track down. And as I told you earlier, the 2 different aspects of our brain, the conscious and the subconscious, and understanding how to utilize one and how not to utilize the other, that is very important. So this is where I'm coming back to now. How the heck to do that, and what to do with the conscious brain and what not to do with the conscious brain. So with the conscious brain, you create the Pinterest board, right? And what's the biggest mistake usually people make? They are trying to consciously understand how to get there, okay? So if you try to get healthy, and you put that, I'm gonna stick with this very trivial idea of 8-packs, not even 6-packs, guys. I hope you noticed 8-packs sometimes. So you put that 8-pack thing there, and you're like, Okay, so I did the Pinterest board. It's right there. It's visually affecting me. I look at my Pinterest board and I'm like, oh, yes, right? Then you did the job, what you had to do consciously. What is your job now, consciously and subconsciously? You have to understand that your tracking device doesn't operate through the conscious part. It operates through the subconscious. You cannot figure out from where you are right now, consciously, how to get to that very place. If you try to do that, what's going to happen? You're going to get confused because it's too complex. There's no bloody way with this tiny ass conscious brain we have, you can't figure out such a complex things as figuring out a life, figuring out a relationship problem, figuring out air pollution, right? You can't figure that out, it's too complicated. What you need to do, you got to be clear at what you're tracking, and you got to trust that your subconscious mind, your whole tracking device will lead you there as long as you know exactly what you want. Okay? So that is a very important thing, because as you're tracking along and you're tracking down your ideas of cleaner air, eventually you look back and you'll be like, oh yeah, the reason I had to do this and I had to meet accidentally with this person and this person because it led me to the place where I am. When you look back, you can understand consciously what your trail behind you is. But looking forward, you can't understand the little intricate details of the trail. Let me give you an interesting example. I've been working with this particular gentleman for about 8 years, who's a quite lovely businessman. And when first time I met him, he was a pretty, straight cookie cutter type of businessman going about their life in a particular way. He was pretty successful. And then gradually he started to change the way how he operated, and he realized that working 12 hours a day, it brought in the bacon, but his family didn't get enough attention, and his kids and all that stuff. And he gradually started to change his ways around. And he managed to get to the place where he was only working about 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and the rest of his day he was making sure that when he gets to work, he can do genius work, right? So he got to that place. So what happened to him, his company paid for him to go to this retreat, this 3-day retreat, just to learn more about the business, right? And after the second day, he was like, okay, this is all nice and dandy, but the third day, I don't feel like going to the third day. And I know there's a golf course around the corner, and I have a high school buddy who I haven't seen for about 15 years, who lives here, and he's been sending me emails that, hey, if you come around here, let's go, to this golf course, it's so cool. And he was obviously battling inside of himself that, okay, so I should really go, the company paid for this for me, but I don't feel like it. And if I listen to my subconscious mind, which the subconscious mind operates in an interesting way, it sends you messages through emotions and feelings, right? So he's like, all right, so if I'm listening, why is that in me, everything is telling me not to go to this bloody conference on the third day and just play golf? Now, consciously, it doesn't make sense, right? Well, you should be there, they paid for you, you should go there. So what he did, screw that. I'm gonna go play golf with my buddy, who I haven't seen for 15 years. Called up his friend, they went to play golfing, they play around, and his friend is like, they're talking, why are you here? He's like, yeah, I'm here at this conference. And the guy's like, oh, that's funny. The guy I know is at that conference as well. So make sure I'll, hook you guys up. So what happens is the friend hooked him up via email, they met up, and the guy made the biggest business deal he's ever made. All right? So when he looks back, he's like, that's why I had to go to the golf course. So I meet my old buddy who's gonna introduce me to this guy. Now, consciously, there's no way to predict that. To figure that out. Once you look back, you can be like, okay, this is how the subconscious brain works. The subconscious brain has such an unbelievable capability to understand things and components, that could work together in a mysterious ways, that it can lead you on these weird places, which consciously it's so difficult to comprehend. But this is why magic exists. Magic exists. And when you're a kid, you don't doubt these things. I tell these ideas to kids and they're like, yeah, makes sense. Yep. What do you want to be? And they tell me these crazy things. They have no problem of thinking of the ideal. They have no problem of believing magic. And at one point in our lives, we lose that capability. If enough school beat you down, if enough people told you that you can't, if enough ideas you saw, and social media, put out their ideas that made you feel like, a shriveled up human being because everyone on social media is so happy and you're not 24 hours long. All of these things beat you up enough that eventually you don't believe in your own capabilities even a little bit. So you stop dreaming, right? And don't listen to your emotions, because emotions, what do they tell you? If in the school bench, right? If you feel like jumping up and scream, they tell you, you can't do that. You know, but I felt like it. No, you need to sit here and listen, right? We are not educated what emotions are for. It's such an important aspect of our being, yet most of the time they say, yeah, well, emotions are just chemical things, right? Hormonal imbalances, whatever. Well, it's not that simple. Yeah, it is hormonal. When I had the coffee, there are certain, hormones started to elevate in my system. But there is much more, because we are really intertwined beings. That the physical, the psychological, and let's say the spiritual as well, they're all intertwined into one very thing. So I don't believe just hormones act the way how they are. There is some other mysterious things as well, So that's why, I believe that people need to, again, start to believe in the impossible, in magic, right? Because it happened before. And then if enough people believes in something that's magical, that's when miracles can happen, And very simply, very quickly. It doesn't need to take 100 years for things to change. Just think about back in the 80s, right? When we realized that the ozone layer was thinning because of all those sprays that we were using, we banned them. What happened? The ozone got better, Pop, like that. Literally in no time, relatively. So collectively, the decisions that we make, if we apply ourselves properly, we believe in our amazing tracking capability, right? Then it's amazing what we can do in a way that consciously will not make sense until we get there. And then we look back and we're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's why. That's why we needed to do that. That's why I needed to start to work on myself. Because when I was doing that, I learned to, again, believe in magic and my own unlimited capabilities. And once I did that, I was able to apply myself to my work as three people. But at the same time, I got happier with my love life. I had better sex with my spouse. I was able to be present with my kids more. At the same time, when I exercise now, it's not because an idea in my head that I want to have a 20-inch waist. It's not about that. It's about something bigger, right? So, I know it's a lot of things I've done on you guys, with this outline. I hope it adds up to one single message, right? So when it comes to you guys as a group together, figuring out how you as a tribe can develop systems that will provide the bedrock for you individually to start to bring your absolute best out of your own life and create a tribe that will supply those things. And me, as talking to you here and potentially in the future be involved with you guys, if I can be part of that by supplying you guys a structure, then we can really make a difference as a tribe. And that's how I believe you guys are already so successful at three people. You inspired so many. You have the environment so much. So you guys are already doing so many good things. So imagine if we are able to dump all of these ideas out there and intertwine it through the work you do, intertwine it through every single one of you guys' life. How amazing that could be, So I want to leave you with that. And thank you so much for listening. And I want to open this up for questions, because there's a lot of things. Usually people are a little bit taken back from all of these ideas because it's put together in a different way. So oftentimes people get scared and they don't ask questions. We're like, okay, this makes sense. I'm very confused right now. Now, you don't need to know and figure this out and implement into your life all of these ideas right now. You don't. This is why it takes a while. It's not like, you can just get on, okay, cool, I got the answers, and I'm going to go home and do all the stuff right. It's not at all. This is why, hopefully, we're going to be able to figure out a system all together that I can try to implement in your processes, and over time, we can make a big difference altogether. Okay? Yes?
Thank you. It's perfect timing today for you to share that, because in our staff coffee that we were having, we were celebrating yesterday that the County Board of Supervisors voted to change the water game entirely in LA. It came out of an arc of the last 26 years of our work here, which was basically saying we do water all wrong in LA. We throw it away. We have a watershed. That's what a forest was and did, and we're suffering because we're throwing it away, and we need to capture it and bring it back into people's lives. And that idea fixed in me from wherever it came, but and you know, I look pretty nutty to most people, and like from the Army Corps of Engineers who set out all the engineering for the country, to the people responsible for keeping everyone safe in floods, our flood control agency, to slowly, you know, meandering very weird paths to the point where what was not visible for people became visible enough that 4 of the 5 county supervisors could choose to say, we need to take this to the people so we can raise $20 to $30 billion locally to change the game. And so we've just witnessed that, and it's great. Cindy plugged in 20 years ago at this point where almost no one saw it, and yesterday we saw not just us expressing this idea, but how many, couple hundred people were there backing us up, and many people using great language. And the path of meandering that you described, of the crazy steps. What does this have to do with that? You're fucking crazy. Yeah. And yet the gifts of those meanders and weird things to trigger hyper leaps towards that goal. It's treat people's story, not just with water, but multiple things. And so perfect moment to share that. And I will shut up in a second, just another few sentences. You noted that we chose as a people to get rid of lead, and it's made a difference. We chose back then, the world got aware of the impact of chlorofluorocarbons on the ozone layer, and by the way, I saw this presentation, and I can't find it, but it's stunning. The world consumption of chlorofluorocarbons, the things that it's going up and up and up, and then boom, stops, right? And the consumption just drops. The point at which on that graph that the law kicked in globally was after the precipitous fall. Right? It was, we spread the awareness so quickly that people stopped buying. It destroyed the markets instantly because people didn't want it. Now, that was one of the last times we collectively, globally, made such a potent, effective decision. Why? Is because industry learned from that and said never again. What we have to do to prevent that from ever happening again is to keep sowing doubt. You talk the weeds. If we can cloud everyone's belief with weeds, we can stop them from stopping us. And that's what has happened with climate change. The Koch brothers have invested for 30 years in denial, in every public hearing in town and all that. Just
in weed production, basically.
What's that? Yeah, weed production, and so it blocks our view, makes us totally doubt ourselves. I mean, and those of us who know this stuff, I mean, it's incredible. I go into other countries, Singapore, Australia, sitting in meetings, planning and implementing climate adaptation to save people and save cities, and I feel, as much as I know, I feel like I'm sinning because we've been so saturated with the weeds. It's like, how are these people getting away with talking about climate change and actually changing billions of dollars in government spending and people's lives to protect them? Where here we've been so consciously filled with that stuff. So I'm bringing that up not as another weed, but as is that thunder? Yes, he's with us. She's with us. We are.
Somebody's talking to us, guys.
We are at this moment. Yeah, I've got chills. The thought that this little group of people, right at the very GPS center of Los Angeles, can change the game seems absurd, but we do, and we have access to more kids, more minds than anybody in this town, and we see this stuff happen. So we need this strength because we're filled with doubt, and NPR, the best source of we would think healthy information is still so toxic right now because it's trying to protect us. But so I'll stop and just validate our experience matches your story. You know, an absurd path until you look back.
Yeah.
But wow, that led to that, led to that, led to that.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah, and his life that's what I love about his process, how he started when he was a little boy, starting to plant the trees, right? One thing that was clear to him, what the heck he wanted, right? How to go about it. If someone would explain to him this is what's going to take, he probably would have given up. Like, no way I can go through all that, right? But that's the beauty of it, that the stuff is too complex, too overwhelming, you don't know till after. This is why we can apply ourselves and go about crazy things, right? Many things I wouldn't have done in my life if I would have known what it's going to take. But because I was focusing on the things that viscerally affected me, you know, it was easy because I was focusing on that. And then we have, you know, unbelievable amount of energy stored in us. So we can do anything and everything, you know, as long as we don't allow our primitive, tiny, conscious mind to get in the way, you know, and put too much attention to it. Yes, yes.
So I have a multiple part question.
Okay.
I really love analogies, so going back to the telescope on,
Yep.
on the weapon, right? So I take out my scope,
Okay.
and let's assume it's a little rusty.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions for taking out that rust?
Totally.
Second part is do you have suggestions for using a 5 times zoom versus a 30 times zoom when I'm setting that goal? Right? Should I focus on general path or specific rock?
Very good question. Yep.
And suggestions for refocusing.
Okay. So first,
That's great. That was awesome.
it's a very good question. The biggest mistake we can make choosing the right lens is that we're choosing the lens that we think is possible. Okay? You really want to shoot for the ideal without limitation. That is the most important thing. Because the ideal will viscerally affect you in a way how, like think about when you were a little kid and you were dreaming about certain things. I grew up in Eastern Europe and I used to dream about America, right? To be able to live here and do the things that, you know, excited me over here. Now, I grew up still when there was communism, so there was the Iron Curtain literally beside my city. So that was such a crazy idea. Like we couldn't even go to Austria, you know, which was 30 kilometers from my hometown. We couldn't even go there. And I was dreaming about being in America. So if I would have chosen the lens, right, that somewhat gives the possible, then I would not be able to be here today, you know? So you have to choose the thing that blows your hair back without any kind of idea of limitations. When you're a kid, it's easy to do this. You pick the right lens, which is like shooting for the perfection. As you get older, it's harder to choose that, you know? So choose the lens whichever makes you see the furthest possible way, you know? Now, rusty lens. Basically what you're telling me is that you have a lot of negative thoughts, negative ideas, right? So the rust is the negative thoughts, which clouds your scope. If you have a lot of things in here, and let's say 70 to 85% of it is garbage that you don't really want, then it's harder to see the things that you really want. So your job, beside putting the seed in there, is also to pull out the negative thoughts. And there are plenty of different methods how you can cultivate these automatic negative thoughts. I call those ants, automatic negative thoughts. How you can develop a system and new patterns in your brain, how you can remove these negative thoughts. Now, it takes another kind of session, essentially, for us to develop those tools and understanding how you can do it the most effective way. But yes, removing the rust or the cloudiness of that lens is very important. Without that, you make it very difficult for you to get to wherever you are trying to get to. Okay? I hope that answers your questions. Okay? Yeah. And you had a question over here as well?
I had, yeah.
Yes.
So if you've talked about brain injuries.
Yeah.
To what extent? I mean, so many of us that have done sports our whole lives, like I've had multiple minor concussions.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
one
So
somewhat major
brain
concussion.
injuries, yeah.
So like, am I gonna?
Very good
can I do
question.
this?
Yeah.
You're out of here.
Like, oh my God, I might not have the capability.
Yeah, very good question. You know, so let me give you the most extreme example. There have been some really interesting studies they've done on the brain of people who were very severely brain injured, okay? And I'm talking like a big percent of their brain was injured in a very severe way, almost basically disappeared.
Okay.
And the human brain has so many interesting elastic capabilities that your brain doesn't work that, okay, there is this section and this takes care of this job, and there is the other section takes care of that job. Not at all. Your brain has this capability of rewiring itself, you know, if you give the right kind of stimuli to your brain. So if you have a brain injury, and if you work with, let's say, I'm going to bring up the Amen Clinic. Amen Clinic is basically an organization that scanned probably the most brains ever been scanned. So
That's in the Northwest.
They have several different facilities all across the U.S. So what they basically try to see, right, which part of your brain is hyperactive, which part of your brain is non-active at all, and based on that, they can describe you processes to rekindle the sections or figure out, help your brain figure out ways to operate the way how that section, you know, is not needed now because the rest of your brain figured out other way to wire things, right? So you're here, sitting here, talking to me, okay? You have a wonderful energy. There's no way your brain is not good enough to do whatever you set out. There is no way, okay? So I know it sounds very optimistic, but you know, the brain injuries I'm talking about, things, you know, brain injuries that really makes you incapable of existing as a normal human being. Okay? So no, every human being.
I mean, I don't feel like I can't do whatever. I'm just like.
I understand.
You said that so many times. I was like, shit.
Yeah, it's, you know, about 80% of the people who Amen Clinic, for example, examined, I think 80% has some sort of brain injury.
Okay.
All right, so you're not alone. Most of us have brain injuries, and that's just because
I mean, you
of
hit your head when you're a kid.
play a soccer and
yeah,
exactly.
Exactly,
So,
volleyball.
but that's okay because we have extraordinary reserve. You know, so what if your brain is only able to do, you know, 1,900 processes a second? That's still enough.
Okay.
You know, so we have such a big boost in there.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So within an organization, many of us are very bright and have many different focuses and lenses, right? So how is it that you can recommend where we can all, within our focuses and our lenses and our individual goals within different departments, can really submerge those and have a very focused, holistic lens while meeting each other's lens and focuses overall? Is there any tools or is there any practices that you suggest that we could do?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there was one point in our society about 20,000, 15,000 years ago where what's good for society and what's good for the individual split. Okay? The moment we started to go into agriculture, that's the moment when what was good for the society and what's good for the individual split. In a hunter-gatherer society, the two is exactly the same. All right? So it's a very good question because of that. You have your little tribe here, and what individually is good for you, you might think that it's not necessarily aligns itself with what's good for the tribe itself. But if you really start to wrap your mind around this, your individual job is to create the most amazing hunter, you know, tracker that you can possibly be. In that process, you know, if you really start to focus on yourself in this way, what's going to happen? You're going to be more balanced hormonally. When you're more balanced hormonally, what's going to happen with your personal relationships? You have a better possibility to be there for your partner. Okay? Chances are, if you do something like this and you lead by example, that the partner and the people close to you, they're going to ask you, what are you doing? Why are you so happy these days? You know, people want that. People don't like to be educated by being told. People like to be educated by being shown, you know? So I could talk to people till the sun goes down to be healthy, but if I don't walk the path, good luck. You know, people come to me because they're like, all right, So I've seen you run barefoot a marathon last week, and you're just running another one, today. So what the heck you're doing, right? So if I would just go to people and just start to preach them, you have to do this, that wouldn't affect. So you got to lead by example. So when you do that, you take good care of yourself. Suddenly your spouse doing the same thing, right? And then suddenly you guys have a better relationship, right? When you take care of yourself, and the worker who you work together with sees the changes in you, because now suddenly when you're sitting in your office, right, you're coming up with ideas that, holy shit, where did that come from? It's come from that you're more balanced, you're more rested, you have better nutrients going through your brain, right? You were happy because you had, great, intimate time with your spouse in the morning. So when you're at the office, you were just better, right? So all of that shows up by having increased capability at the office and coming up with genius ideas and applying yourself better. So the people around you are going to be asking you, what are you doing, right? So if everyone starts to operate like this in your tribe, then suddenly all of you guys, even though you're working individually on yourself, it starts to add up as a cohesive force, right? If all of us doing it together. This is why we need to understand that being healthy is not an individual competition. It's not a one-person job. No, it's a societal job. We are all in it together. That's why tribes used to exist together in a way that when a healthy tribe was doing things together, for example, if something happened to you, what's the natural thing that happens in a natural tribe? Something happens to you during the day. Every evening, you sit around the campfire, and you have, I call these the campfire discussions. You say something that, oh, this is what happened to me. Then another person give you their take on that event and their experiences with similar events. And then there's a conversation. So suddenly an event that happened to you, it starts to give to all the people who are around you, and they allowed you to they give you perspective that allowed you to think about it more. So that way even tiny events can become integral part of your existence. So I had this experience before that I talked to people who had giant events take place in their life. They got married, right? If an event that happens that's huge in your life, but you don't have a group, a tribe to discuss it with after, even a big event can go and pass in your life and have no real major effect on you if you don't discuss it, you don't, campfire converse it, around. If you have the tribe to discuss these ideas with, then suddenly what happens, even the smallest event, like I had this very experience that there was a spider in the corner of my house somewhere, right? You might not like spiders, but so there was a spider, right? And it was just so interesting because my wife and I, we are very careful not to kill spiders inside the house, because usually spiders that are inside your house are not harmful to you as a human being, but they help with catching mosquitoes and stuff like that. And we had a nice little conversation about that, right? And then I sat down with a group, and somehow in a weird way, someone brought up spiders, and we started to talk about that, right? And then other people started to look at the spiders in a different ways in their home, right? So that spider, if my wife and I don't talk about it at home, that event would have just disappeared, and probably 3-4 days after I would have forgotten about that spider. But because her and I talked about it, I have a lovely little tribe to talk about weird shit. And then I had the opportunity to expose those ideas to a tribe that I was part of. Suddenly all the people benefited from that. So if you take good care of yourself and you have a tribe like this to really expose those new ideas, then suddenly the whole thing starts to work like this, and you can benefit from other people's experiences by being exposed to it. So one person's goal is going to be maybe to be able to physically creating the healthiest brain. So if you think you have a shortcoming in some aspect of your brain, you might be like, you know what, I really want to create the healthiest, most balanced brain. So whatever part of my brain is maybe injured, the rest of it going to compensate and overcompensate. And
just for the record, I don't think.
I know. I'm just saying that.
I have a great brain.
So but
that
maybe,
is my lens.
So let me talk to this person who just said the same thing. So maybe the efforts of that person will benefit you, because the ideas that she's gonna wrap her mind around will be very useful to you as well and to your brain as well. So that's how your individual efforts and the tribal effort will add up into one big cohesive force, right? Yes.
I have a sort of related question.
Yeah.
So the situation that a drive like ours faces is that the work we do has this moral imperative behind it, and it's existential in its existence, right?
Yeah.
So what I've observed is that many of us actually don't allow ourselves, there's actually almost a sense of guilt, that if we aren't fully engaged in the work, and if we self-care, there's, I don't know, I think there is a bit of a misbalance there.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips for that kind of situation, which I think
Yes.
is a little bit different in its type of pressure?
Yeah.
Maybe not the amount of pressure, but the type
Totally.
of pressure that we
Yeah,
experience.
totally. So when we examined people who were super successful in holistic terms, what do I mean by that? People who have a job that they are truly inspired by, and they were able to apply themselves through their career in a way that it changed the industry, whatever they are involved in. The same person who has a family that's very healthy, they have a wonderful relationship with their spouse, their kids. The person who's socially very capable, they have a very good supporting group of friends surrounding them. Who's physically also very capable, right? So who also have a lot of money that they are able to have the kind of freedom in the modern world that we all kind of need, right? So if I define success this way, in these holistic terms, right? When you examine these kind of people, there's a very interesting thing that you see when it comes to their work, right? The work is basically, if they want to do an amazing work at whatever blows their hair back, they realize that if I spend 12 hours of my day on that job, right, I will be not being able to support my family with the amount of attention they need. I'm not going to be able to support my physical being with all I need. So what starts to happen? That person would start to have a lower back pain. When you have lower back pain, and if it reaches a certain level, trust me, you ain't going to be able to think about the environment if you have severe lower back pain, because it's just too present in your life. So it's going to divert attention, energy from where you feel like you have to devote yourself. If you wake up in the morning and you have a big fight every morning with your spouse, trust me, you ain't going to be able to come here and save the planet. You know, you need to be a genius if you want to change the planet. I know you guys literally want to change the planet, which is exciting. The only way you can do this if you really bring your A game. Your A game is not going to come from working 12 hours a day, because you're going to wear yourself down. Most corporations actually work that way. They hire someone who has a great resume, who has a good energy. They hire them, they work them 12 hours a day, and if you look at that person 10 years later, they're a shadow of their former self. So this is why I feel like even in corporations today, they start to understand that we need to support our workforce for selfish reasons. They want to use you more, by taking away the work from them, because they realize more work, 12 hours of work is not going to be nearly as effective as 8 hours of very focused, good quality A-game work, So more is not better. If that was the case, then we couldn't have the difference between, Jeff Bezos' success and a person who lives on the street. We don't have that big of a difference. The difference is that one learned where to focus, how to focus their capabilities in a way that will be more productive. And that is not more work. Jeff Bezos didn't work that much harder than you and I, yet he has something figured out, how he applies himself. So instead of working hard, first you always need to work smart. The only way you can work smart if you have your absolute best self. And then once you work smart, then you can work hard. But usually what happens is you realize that your parameters, hard work can only take so much time away from you before it's going to start to affect you in a negative way. That way you cannot apply yourself as much as you would ideally wish. You understand? So it takes a while, and it is an insecure spot, because essentially at one point you need to say, no, I know I have another 15, 20 emails to answer today, but if I do that, it's going to mess me up for tomorrow. And tomorrow when I come back and I have another 30 emails to answer, I'm not going to be able to give the best answers I can possibly do. And then again, if I keep doing it this way, over time you're wearing yourself down more and more and more, and you age more and more and more, and your brain going to be less and less capable. Okay? So I'm going to extend on this for a second, a little bit even longer, because I think it's a very important one for all of you guys to understand how the aging brain happens. Now, what we know when it comes to brain aging is that till age of 25 or so, your brain rewires itself about every 7 or 8 years. Okay? That means that the way how your brain operates at the age of 7 or 14 and 21, it's quite drastically different. Now that natural built-in rewiring stops at age 25 or so, if you don't expose your brain to new challenges, right? If you expose yourself to new challenges, a new way of existence, then every once in a while your brain can rewire itself even at the age of 85, okay? This is why if you live a life that constantly challenges you and brings in new and different and inspires you, that's why you can meet a 70-year-old person who lives their life like this and you feel like you're talking to a 30-year-old. They're so fresh. But I had the chance to talk to some 35-year-olds who I'm like, oh my God, you talk like a 90-year-old man, you know? No, this is the way how I do everything. Yeah, I don't know. You know, so your brain can age fast and the brain can rewire itself and stay young forever. If you work hard and you keep doing the same things and you're spending too much time with similar way of going about things, right? Then you will just age faster. So 20 years from now, you're not going to be able to do nearly as big of a miracles as if you would really apply yourself and realize that you're an individual, you have certain needs. If you don't go to sleep at 9:30 in the evening, you're missing out from the first section of your sleep cycles, right? Which is not starting when you go to sleep, it starts whenever the sun goes down, right? So you don't go to sleep because you're working into the night. What do? You're just destroying your brain, you're destroying yourself, you know? And it's a very selfish thing to do because you're taking your potential magic away from society. So if you want to be selfish, work hard. If you want to do good for society, take care of yourself so you can apply yourself the best possible way. Turn it around. It's just a belief system that we buy into because what we are told, is Hollywood movies and all of those things, right? Oh yeah, he worked really hard and went for it and the lone wolf and all that stuff, right? These ideas, the lone wolf, working your ass off and stuff like that, works in some regards, in some weird, thwarted way, but none of those people are happy, So, yes, I don't know if it answers your question, but it's just a belief and...
I think your golf course story actually was the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Doing that play turned out to actually benefit the work.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry.
Yeah.
So, thank you for coming and being with us. I just felt like when you were talking, it was just, you just reminded me, you're much younger than my parents, but you reminded me of my mom and my dad and what they would tell us growing up. And it was so, they're Mexicans. I grew up in these small little towns, and the animal, what you just said about the tracking, my dad always told us, we're from Chihuahua. My dad is, my mom's from Veracruz. And the people there that met us,
Yep.
the indigenous people that met us, and he would always tell us about how they got their food.
Mm-hmm.
And when you spoke, I was like, oh my God, like, I want my dad, I want my mom to be here. And it was this whole thing about what you said, where it was always like, you gotta be ahead, it's like you follow the tracks, that's what they would do, they would follow the tracks, and they would just wear down the animal, but beyond wearing down the animal, you got ahead of the animal. You actually began to think like what you said. What you said was like, oh my God, my dad would always tell us. It's like you were just saying exactly what he would say. And it was always about kind of being ahead of the game, right? And really connecting to your environments. And, these are folks, my mom has a 3rd grade education. My dad went to 6th grade, and then he kept studying always. But it was this connection back to us, like who we are and the earth and land and animals and like where we fit in, that got us to, be able to do some good stuff in a big urban area like Los Angeles, which is so different than like when I go back to where they're from. It's so just like what you're talking about. It's community. It's every day, every night when we go back, we all get together in a circle and we talk. And a lot of times there's literally fire there. Like, it's amazing. And I see like, how we get pulled away from that. But I go back has not taught us those fundamental like things that you're talking about right now. And it goes back to just internally like really truly like connecting like with our soul, with our passion, like with love, like what we want to do. And so this is really fantastic.
Right on.
Yeah,
right
this
on.
is really
Thank you.
fantastic. And I mean, I have so many questions that I just want, like Michelle's question was right on, you know, the question of like, we all have our lens, and I think we have that vision. We have this vision for justice, we have this vision for change, we have this vision for what we want in the environment. But how we all get there, right? How we all get there together as a team can be something so powerful that you could help us with.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like, I mean, I've only been here for 2 years, but this team, it's just like, you know, it's not about the numbers, but we were at a certain level in terms of like financially, the kind of money we were bringing into the organization, the teams. We had to kind of cut a little bit, but now it's like we're believing that we can be bigger. And not only are we believing, but we're getting bigger, and we're doing more, and we're having huge impact. And what Andy just said, what we did yesterday was phenomenal work with leadership from tree people. And so if we could get like how we get all of those, you know, our lenses that are powerful, because I've had so much time individually with people, they're powerful lenses, and how we could get all those lenses combined, like how do we actually do, you know, have bigger impact in a shorter amount of time? Because I agree with you. Some of my most effective days are those days when I'm in there for 4 hours, and I'm focused, and I get so much done, and then I go and I spend time with my, you know, 8-year-old nephew. And then I come back the next day, and I could, you know, have a 14-hour day, and I don't feel as effective, right? So I agree with you on all the timing, but it's like, how do we all come together? So it was something where, you know, it's hard to do in an hour-and-a-half session, but I really do hope that you can continue to work with us.
Oh, thank you.
Because this could lead to tree people just being really the change maker for what LA needs in terms of the environment.
Yeah.
But thank you, really. I mean, it's beautiful.
Oh,
to
thank
look
you very
at
much.
you,
Thank
like,
you.
It spoke to my heart, and like really spoke to like what helped me and has helped me. And it went back to it was crazy. Like when you just said it, like the animal. I'm like, that was my dad. He would say that. It was hunting that deer. How you would
Well,
get that deer. And he would always say the
no.
last thing is like, he would say, and my mom, la mente mueve montañas. Your mind can move mountains.
That's, and these kind of things are, these traces of ideas are everywhere. You go to the Aboriginals, you know, in Australia, they also do similar way of hunting. Now they don't do it anymore, but they did 40 years ago. So there are still records of those people doing these kind of things, you know. There is one of the most ancient footprints that they found, for example, again, in Australia, 35,000 footsteps, which was basically 8 individuals running after an animal. And the footprints are still there. It's pretty amazing. So these 8 individuals were running after some sort of animal, because the animal footprint, I don't remember what animal it was, but what was amazing to see is that it was a footprint of this kind of persistence hunting. What a side effect, a side note on this, that one of the persons whose footprint is there, whose name is T8, they measured from the stride, the position of the foot and stuff like that, how fast this person was running. And what's mind-boggling, that he was running only 2 miles per hour slower than Usain Bolt when he won the Olympics.
Wow.
And this guy was running on a slippery surface, barefoot, after an animal. We don't know if this was his maximum speed. So when we think about, right, our capabilities, we are not even remotely, even Olympic athletes, they are not remotely close to the capabilities that we all have, the potential in us, in our DNA, you know? The very first Homo sapiens sapiens who existed on the planet, that group, the Cro-Magnon people, they were able to examine their bones. And they wanted, from the bones, you can see where the tendons and ligaments attached, the ligaments attached to the bones. Depending on how much force goes through a ligament, the bony buildup will be more and more and more. So from the bones of those Cro-Magnon people, the first Homo sapiens sapiens, they were able to calculate what kind of forces went through their joints because of these bony buildups. And what they discovered was pretty crazy. Based on the forces that went through their whole body, they would be able to beat any Olympic champion today in every single event. Okay, so they were stronger than the strongest human being, and now these are just, you know, back 20,000 years ago, but there are recorded cases, even back in the 1700s, you know, where people were able to lift up boulders that are heavier than the current world record in Olympic weightlifting, you know. People who were able to, even in the early 1900s, there are people who are recorded jumping over, because of traditional rituals, over certain obstacles. There is this tribe called the Chukis, I think Chukis, yeah? In Africa, I might pronounce it wrong, but whatever. So they had a tradition that you can't become a man until you're able to jump over the same height as your own height. Okay, so I'm 6'2", right? I've been 6'2" for a good while now. So I couldn't have become a man unless I can jump over something that's 6'2". This is their ritual, that's their physical ritual. So there are recorded cases where on photographs they show these people jumping over things. Now these people were pretty tall. So even today, the pictures and the measurements they had, even today the current world record of high jump is about 8 centimeters, which about 3 inches shorter than those kids were doing on a regular basis. So what I'm trying to say here, traditionally, the footprints of these genius capabilities are everywhere. You know, if you look at, you know, the Siberian reindeer hunters, how they are tracking animals, how they are running down reindeer, you know, to herd them. How in Mexico, the Tarahumara, for example, they are very famous about having unbelievable capabilities of running. You know, I don't know if you know, but the Tarahumaras back in the early 90s, they participated in some of the world's most prestigious ultra-distance marathon runs, and they were beating the shit out of everyone.
Yeah,
you know,
we would
not
here in, they would actually come in Pasadena. And
yeah. It was unbelievable what they could do, you know. But the way how they did it, that was really interesting as well. Because it's not like, you know, they started to run and they passed everyone and they ran. No. They followed the leaders, and then before the end, they just ran by them. Because they don't know how to run without a goal, and their goal is always tracking things down. So they were just tracking the person who was the front, and then they knew that, okay, for the sake of this race, we need to win. So before the end, they just ran by. And usually they were laughing, and they were running in sandals and these big baggy clothes. And this is not a mythical story, it's a recorded races, several of them, on these 100-mile races, where these folks, your ancestors, essentially just blew away all of these ultra-distance athletes who've been training all their lives to be the best runners. And these people just ran by them as if it was nothing, because they possessed the capabilities that we're all meant to have as human beings, you know? But this is, the Sun people in Africa have the same kind of tradition, so it's everywhere. In Europe as well, we also used to have the same capabilities, you know? But unfortunately, more civilized we became, more we lost these physical traditions and psychological and spiritual traditions, so we all kind of just a shadow of our potential. But if you start to wrap your mind around all of these ideas, you can start to, you know, really gain and then access your DNA and the deeper levels, you know? Yes?
I just, taking the leap from the physical to the question about how do we all unite, since we're looking at your story, I just remember you sharing a few weeks ago about the experience when you went back to Mexico with someone's remains, right?
Mm-hmm. My grandma.
And somehow, way up in Mountain Village, and people knew. You hadn't called them, hadn't informed them. The first people saw you, and somehow they spread the information miles ahead that they were ready to receive you. Yeah. And that's the, I'm not trying to make it mystical, but it is that shared tribal thing about being able to unite information brain.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable what the collective kind of brain, how it works.
Exactly. Oh yeah, people just started coming down, like, you know, like literally. You didn't even know homes existed. And they all came to greet her.
Well, in Australia, they had these recorded cases when Aboriginal tribes, when they were first contacted, the way how they were operating was pretty unbelievable, because they were able to dream collectively, meaning the whole tribe dreamt the same thing at night, and they were doing things in their dream together, you know? So they were able to communicate about complex subjects without talking, you know? So when you utilize your brain and you wire your brain and you feed it with the right kind of stimuli, it's amazing what that sixth sense can do to you and how it can help you. The sixth sense today, you tell anyone, sixth sense, they're like, oh yeah, sixth sense, whatever, right? Yeah, sure, I want to believe it. But no, if you apply yourself properly, the sixth sense become an amazing tool that you can use in your life, you know? Because that's the sense used to be the lifesaver sense. You know, the sixth sense was when you're like, oh, something is wrong. And you looked around and the lion was talking to you, you know? So that used to save your ass. It wasn't necessarily your eyes, and when the five senses kind of fail, that's when the sixth sense saved you, you know? And many believe there is more than sixth sense. There is many other senses potentially. And it's hard to talk about these things because it's not always physical. If you're willing to buy into the idea that we are more than just a physical being, and there is something else out there too, and then suddenly the problem shows up that talking is a physical vibration, right? And it's very hard to describe something that's non-physical through a physical thing like talking. So there are certain things you can feel, certain things you can kind of have a sense of, but not being able to express it, but you know it's there. And we all have that, you know, in some weird ways. You know that the way you love if you have a kid, the way you love your parents, or the way you love your spouse, it's all different type of thing. It's hard to describe how different, but it is different. It's not one is more than the other, it is just different. All of them are very, you know, different, yet they are all we call love, right? So it's hard to distinguish and describe in physical ways how it is different, but we know that it's different. So there's many things that we can feel inside, deep inside, that is important and meaningful. But again, we don't have the tribes to really, you know, talk about these things and try to express it and give a version of opinion about it. And most of the time in our society, if you throw something out there like this, they think you're kind of cuckoo and esoteric crazy man, right? So I'm kind of happy to talk to a group like this. Usually I have to be very careful how far I can go with this. Yeah.
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, I love hearing your use of the word magic, because I've been here a long time with this guy, and we really embraced and believed that deep in our gut, all the stuff you're talking about. And I used to, you know, people ask me about, well, what is it about tree people? And I go, I can't quite explain it, because it's some way, somehow, the organization and the collective of this organization has manifested miracles. Absolutely manifested miracles at all different levels, you know. Even being blessed with being on this site, you know, and a handful of hippies being handed over a 45-acre piece of property to do our good work. And so, you know, it's obviously no mistake that you're here today to help reinvigorate the tribe and help us to carry on the miracles that we have to make happen here.
Right on. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
So a very quick man, we're already past time, and I also want to thank you for being here because this is remarkably interesting and everything. You talked about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind.
Subconscious, yeah. Unconscious.
Okay. I was wondering, like, I've had friends that have like told me about like lucid dreaming or like meditating and like kind of trying to like tap into like your subconscious that way. Is that like something you see?
Yeah, it's a
way to try to, like,
yeah. I mean, totally, and that's a very good question. You know, again, this dreaming is just another one of those things. Just like I was describing to you about emotions. In a modern world, what do they tell you and teach you about dreaming at school or at home? Nothing.
Yeah.
This is something that happens. There's no place for it. Well, consciously, there's no place for it. It's hard to describe what it is for. We know, I mean, there are some ideas now that they try to develop what dreams are for, but dreams are very important. We spend a heck of a lot of time doing it. So you've got to have an important aspect of our existence, right? Lucid dreaming is something that you can do. You can train yourself to do. And as I described to you, there are groups who are able to dream together. They can do things together in their dreams. Dreams are fantastic because you can experiment with things where you don't have the danger, the physical limitations that you're harming your vessel, right? And you can experiment with things that way. And, you know, in many reasons, you know, the reason we have collective dreams that are the same. dreaming with a bear is something that most Caucasians have at one point in their lives, that they're scared of bears. You know, in their dream, they dreamed of being chased by a bear or chased by a lion or stuff like that. We have these collective dreams about big animals. Why is that? Because when you're dreaming something like this, you can be exposed to a majorly dangerous situation, and you can experience that as if it was real, but it's not real in a physical sense, so you get used to it. So when you're exposed to the situation that there's a bear in front of you in real life, then you already went through those emotions at one time, so it's not your first time, so it's not such a giant shock to your system, because you already went through it in your dream, you know? So dreaming is a conditioning yourself for the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, so you can, when it happens to you potentially in real life, you're already somewhat conditioned. So lucid dreaming puts an extra layer to that, because with lucid dreaming, you can be an active participant consciously of your dream. So you can experiment with things when things show up, right? So that's why lucid dreaming is an integral part of working on yourself as well, eventually. Now the biggest challenge is when it comes to tools and that we can use to better ourselves, to help ourselves to understand ourselves better and our own tool, is that there are too many things out there. There's a lot of information out there. You go on Google, you try to develop self-development, Google self-development, and you're gonna have so much information come to you that you won't know what to do. If you wanna get healthier, you Google best exercise to lose weight, right? You get so much information, it's overwhelming, right? So this is the real problem today, that we have a lot of information that's present, but it's very difficult to sort what works and what's not. So lucid dreaming is a lovely example for that. Lucid dreamings can be a great tool if it's applied the right time in a right structure. You know, exercising is a great tool if you apply it in the right way for yourself, and figuring out how you operate. Like when I work with individuals or groups or teams, every time I need to reinvent the wheel, I have no idea how the heck I'm gonna do this with you guys. I don't. I never have an idea with anyone, because every group, every individual operates differently. So what I do an assessment, how things are and how things are. And then based on that, I start to build a conscious understanding, and also I'm feeding my subconscious about understanding about a group, right? And over time, from my subconscious, things gonna show up. Okay, so this tool would make sense for this group first, to expose this group to this particular tool. And I don't always understand why I start where I start with groups, but I'm okay with that, because I'm aware that the limitations of my conscious mind. But I know that all the efforts and work that I put in throughout the past long time, it will feed me what I need to bring to your team, for example, you know? And luckily I have a good track record, so I don't need to really explain to people, you know? It used to be my real problem was that they were asking me always, especially, you know, on Wall Street, okay, so what you gonna do? Well, how are we gonna do it? You know, I can tell you guys this, what I just told you, because, you know, I have a lot of good resume. But, you know, 15 years ago, I was operating in a similar way, and when they were asking me what you're gonna do, I was like, I don't know. So I had to essentially just bullshit my way around it, because I knew I'm gonna do a good job, but I won't be able to explain to them, well, listen, I'm gonna have to figure this out as we go, you know? So you know what I'm saying? So lucid dreaming, all of these things are very good. When it would enter into our tribe over here, I don't know. We're gonna have to see. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah.
So are you saying that if we all set an intention, like Cindy or Andy says something to us, and we say, okay, tonight, plant the seed and dream about this, all collectively, and we close our eyes, you know, in our respectives,
Yeah.
and wake up, will many of us have a same dream?
You could, but maybe right now, not right now. You need to have a lot of things that you take good care of yourself first, and once you're at a certain level balanced state, then you can experiment with those kind of things. Lucid dreaming, for example, just going back to your example, it's not like, you know, you go to sleep tonight and you tell yourself, okay, I want to be conscious in my dream, and then that's going to happen. No, it's not. But when I do that, it will happen to me because I've already practiced so many times to do that, you know? So once you do your own little individual job,
The lucid dreaming practice.
the lucid dreaming, for example, then at one point, if everyone does that, a year from now, 2 years from now, then we potentially could do this, that we say, okay guys, so let's see how much of our subconscious we can bring to these subjects. Let's dream about the same thing. And then we all do the same thing, and then who knows what the heck is going to come out.
Yeah, it's
you know?
exciting.
Yeah.
I've spent time with groups where, because of that group sharing that he was talking about with wife and them, when we chose to pay attention to intuition, just thoughts, and we said that, you know, just creating a circle, and that we would do that, and actually one of our group members, we were all in Venice and they went to New York. They said, at some point, I'm gonna say hello to you all. And I got it. Several of us got it at the moment that he confirmed later that he had said a hello.
Wow.
But you never, I mean, with all these billions of thoughts we're having moment by moment by moment, without a reason to pay attention and connect and share it, it's not validated. It's just, oh, Randy just said, you know, Randy just popped in and out.
Right.
And that information's, we're all sharing it all the time. But without a conversation to notice it, how it had been in the telescope, we don't notice it, we don't validate it. And so as we spend more time syncing up our vision, our, you know, where we want, what we want to manifest, we'll notice more clues, more validation, more cues and stimulus that is feeding us. That's here and available all the time, and we just don't see it.
And not necessarily consciously.
At all.
Like, yeah, like intentional. You know,
Sure.
like tonight, let's see.
Yeah.
You'll just start to see it happening, you know.
And the sensitivity itself,
Yeah.
you know, most people are desensitized to it. Actually, everyone is desensitized. Most of the things in the modern world is there for you not to use your natural instincts.
Right.
Okay? If you just think about it, just standing on the side of the road and car drives by. Right up until the last 100 years, any species would have ran for their life if something that big comes this fast. So what you needed to do consciously, tell yourself, okay, that's not danger, I'm gonna just stand here. That doesn't mean you're not reacting on some ways. You just learn to tune it out, right? So a lot of things we learn to tune out, right? So because of that, you became this desensitized being. So one of the first jobs that we would need to do is make you more sensitive. So I go back to this gentleman who was 350 pounds, right? Once he became very healthy, he told me that, listen, Csaba, this is so confusing. If I eat a non-organic piece of meat today, I feel like all day I'm screwed. I'm like, oh, what is going on right now? When I was 350 pounds, I could go to Taco Bell, eat 3 burritos, and be totally fine. Why is that? So it's because he became sensitive again. So now you can sense it when something is not aligning with your ideal path, right?
Yes.
So that's why you need to first get very sensitive, and once you're sensitive enough, then you can start to sense others. First sense yourself, and then sense others, and then you can use that as a tool as well. But it's kind of hard to kind of jump the ship. There are certain things that need to be put in place.
Understood.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to say that I guess I think of thoughts that we have, that's in your mind, but you have to put emotion into it, which is your heart. Ever studied anything about your different energies in your body, the different chakras that you have? When you put your intention, if you just have a vision board, a lot of times people have no success with making that materialize because they don't bring it down into their heart level to put that emotion behind it. And if you, it just works better that way. I don't know if you probably are familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Oh yeah.
So he talks a lot about all of this and changing your body physically and the importance of putting emotion behind your intention. It's not just a head thing, but you bring it down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I emphasize that the vision board you create needs to be viscerally so stimulating that it literally makes you so excited.
Yes.
Right? Now there is another subject altogether. Whenever it comes to cycles, any kind of cycles in nature, I'm sure we have to get rolling here now, but there is a cycle to everything that exists in the universe, and those natural cycles we need to be aware as well. They always start with inspiration, just like when the sun comes up on the east. When you look at the sun coming up, it's inspirational. It's something just, you know, you feel it. Now, any kind of process need to start with that energy, what you describe, which is exciting, right? Just like when the sun comes up. Anyhow, that's another story, and we'll talk about it hopefully in the future.
Yeah, I don't want to end this, but there's a crew from CBS with their cameras, and I need to get into costume and makeup, waiting for me. These are almost my pajamas. I didn't want to walk out on you, but maybe we should wrap up this cycle
Yes,
and
definitely.
say thank you so much for
God.
My energy is about 150% higher than it was
Yeah.
when I walked in this morning, and it's not all the caffeine. I'm gonna give you a hug and run.
Right on.
You can talk about what's next and what we're doing, or we'll figure that out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you guys again, appreciate it. Thanks for everything. Yes, yes.